right, that looks good. Ship's veering to port, go 22 knots, sideswipes the iceberg. Murdoch ports around the iceberg, try to keep from hitting the propellers. That looks pretty good.
Most people picture the Titanic's bow resting eerily intact on the ocean floor, a haunting monument to tragedy that feels almost peaceful. But what if I told you that the stern, the other half, is a vastly different story, torn apart so violently that it defies comprehension? This darker chapter has been hidden from public gaze for decades. As new research and detailed imaging reveal a shattered, collapsing wreckage, we are forced to confront a more horrifying truth about the ship's final moments and its ongoing disintegration far below the waves. The famous bow's familiar image. For decades, the image that most people carry in their minds when they think about the Titanic is that of its bow, resting solemnly on the ocean floor. This front half lies deep beneath the sea, its distinctive railings still almost intact, anchors embedded in the dark sediment more than 12,000 feet down. The bow's eerie stillness makes it almost look like the ship never truly left the surface, a frozen monument to a tragedy paused in time. This image first took hold in 1985 when Robert Ballard's team finally discovered the Titanic's resting place after 73 years of mystery. The discovery was not simply about locating the ship. It was about what the cameras revealed. The bow still retained much of its original form despite the fall to the seabed and the passage of decades. Bits of deck and the anchor chains remained visible, giving viewers a sense of order and familiarity in the otherwise alien deep ocean darkness. This recognizable shape provided something tangible for the human mind to cling to. It became the emblem of the Titanic's story beneath the waves. Further explorations in 1986, including dives with the submersible Alvin and the remotely operated vehicle Jason Jr., brought close-up images of the bow that went viral in the collective consciousness. These images appeared in documentaries, books, and museums, reinforcing the bow as the face of the wreck. Even those with only a passing interest in the Titanic knew the bow's haunting silhouette, while the rest of the ship faded into obscurity. This focus on the bow helped create a particular narrative of the disaster, one that felt calm and complete. The ship, though sunk, appeared orderly and dignified in death, allowing people to mourn without confronting the chaos that the sinking really involved. The bow's stillness granted a quiet dignity that became the preferred image, both respectful and visually compelling. It was an easier story to accept. However, this popular image also planted a subtle but critical misconception. Because the bow was so well known and often displayed, many people began to assume they had seen the entire wreck. The ship seemed whole in that iconic view, misleading people into thinking the Titanic had simply settled quietly on the ocean floor. The wreck turned into a single, silent monument, a stark but static reminder of its tragic fate. That familiar image, while powerful, only tells half the story. It leaves out the violent realities of the ship's destruction below the surface. In truth, the Titanic's wreck site covers a much broader area, and the stark difference between the two halves raises uncomfortable questions. Why does the bow appear so majestic and intact, while the other half remains a brutal and fragmented wreck? The answer to this starts with the fact that the Titanic did not sink as one large unit. Instead, it broke apart, and the stories behind those two halves could not be more different. This detail is often overlooked or minimized because it challenges the peaceful image the bow conveys. Yet for decades, survivors told different stories of the ship's final moments. Diving into those conflicting memories and official reports reveals that the widely held impression of a one-piece sinking was never fully accurate. There was always more to the story than the calm bow suggests, a story that the wreck site, once fully mapped, would eventually confirm. Survivors' accounts reveal a fractured truth that clashed sharply with official narratives, setting the stage for decades of debate and denial. Survivor conflicts and official accounts. On the cold April night when the Titanic sank, witnesses experienced widely differing realities, especially regarding how the ship went down. Some survivors described seeing the stern rise high out of the water before the ship broke apart, a moment filled with terror and chaos. Jack Thayer, a 17-year-old first-class passenger, later recounted the ship splitting in two, confirming a violent breakup. Others spoke of hearing a ripping or tearing sound just before the sections separated entirely. Yet this eyewitness testimony was met with skepticism almost immediately. The highest-ranking officer to survive, Charles Lightoller, insisted the Titanic sank intact. His account carried significant authority and, understandably, shaped public and official acceptance. Because rank heavily influenced whose words were trusted, the perspective of officers often overshadowed those of frightened passengers describing the breakup. Both the American and British inquiries launched swiftly after the tragedy sought to gather evidence. They interviewed more than 80 individuals, including crew, passengers, and experts. Still, the official line became one of an intact sinking, a narrative that was simpler to explain and more consistent with the Titanic's legendary image as a massive, nearly unsinkable vessel. This official stance suited what many wanted to believe, that a ship so grand and strong could not have broken in half. The idea of a neat, clean sinking preserved a certain dignity and order to the event, making it easier to process. As a result, survivors' stories of the breakup were dismissed or downplayed, restricted to the margins of Titanic lore for nearly 3/4 of a century. The tension between eyewitness reality and institutional narrative created an unresolved debate. Those who described the ship breaking faced disbelief or quiet erasure as the dominant story filtered through popular culture. Even when some knew the breakup was plausible, given the chaos, the weight of authority and desire for a controlled narrative prevailed. This clash of memories illustrates a common human struggle in disasters, conflicting perceptions competing against official records to shape history. For the Titanic, it meant a sanitized version stuck in place despite growing anecdotal evidence to the contrary. It was a narrative frozen early that shadowed the wreck's discovery that would soon challenge everything. When the Titanic's wreck was finally located in 1985, it brought undeniable proof that these survivor accounts held truth. The ship lay in two separated sections on the sea floor. This discovery marked a turning point that would force a reconsideration of the entire sinking story. The ship's resting place revealed a harsh contradiction to decades-old beliefs, transforming historical understanding overnight. Discovery of the wreck and two halves. The Titanic wreck lay undiscovered for over 70 years, hidden beneath nearly 13,000 feet of North Atlantic water. That changed in 1985 when Robert Ballard and a team from the United States, alongside French partners, located the wreck approximately 400 miles south of Newfoundland. The archaeological find was groundbreaking, not simply for solving the mystery of where the ship lay, but for unveiling the truth about how it settled to the ocean floor. The initial discovery was made not by spotting the ship entire, but by detecting one of the Titanic's massive boilers. This led researchers along a debris trail to the ship's remains, unraveling the long story of its final moments. It did not rest as a single whole vessel, but was clearly broken into two main sections lying apart from one another, disproving the long-held belief in a sunken but intact ship. The significance of the two fragments being clearly separated was immediate and profound. It vindicated the survivors who had insisted the ship had broken apart before sinking and challenged official histories that had denied it. The wreck forced historians, scientists, and the public alike to reconsider what exactly had happened in the dark, icy ocean depths on that April night. The bow, still recognizable and relatively intact, drew the most attention as it confirmed many of the familiar images held worldwide. However, the discovery of the stern section, not rising like the bow, but sprawled across the seabed in a mangled state, added complexity to the narrative. This split confirmed the ship truly had been torn apart in its death throes. Ballard's dives in 1986 with Alvin and Jason Jr. provided the first human eyes on the wreck since the disaster. The dramatic footage and images of both the bow and the distant stern were unlike anything the world had seen before. While the bow offered a haunting glimpse into the ship's grandeur, the stern's distorted form revealed a harsher reality beneath the calm. Over the years, follow-up explorations and advanced imaging technologies have helped piece together the wreck site map, showing how the Titanic's breakup scattered debris over a wide field. This spatial arrangement challenged simpler ideas about how the vessel sank, suggesting a far more violent and chaotic final chapter than was ever imagined. The discovery permanently altered public understanding and provided crucial evidence supporting many survivor testimonies. It reframed the sinking from a singular event into a complex sequence of breaks, tumbling, and destruction deep underwater. Yet even with the ship broken in two, questions remained about how the stern came to be so heavily damaged and why it looked so unlike the orderly bow. The details of the stern's fate would unfold only with continued research and exploration. The contrast between the two halves deepens as we examine the stern's devastating condition and its challenge to the Titanic's legacy, the stern's shattered reality. When explorers reach the stern of the Titanic on the ocean floor, the shock is immediate. Unlike the hauntingly intact bow, the stern presents a scene of destruction so complete it defies easy recognition. It does not rise proudly from the sea. Instead, it lies crushed, folded, and twisted into chaos. This massive section no longer offers clear shapes or familiar outlines, but reads instead as layers of wreckage pressed together in a violent collapse. Detailed imaging captured in 2010, including photo mosaics from above and alongside, revealed the stern's brutal condition better than ever. Researchers describe it as heavily damaged, with torn hull plates, collapsed decks, and an overall mangled structure resting awkwardly on the seabed. This is not a single intact piece, but a sprawling mass of steel deformed beyond the typical idea of a shipwreck. Despite its destruction, the stern remains enormous. Parts of it still break through the wreckage, including the keel driven deep into thick seabed sediment, large propeller blades peeking out of the mud, and the rudder standing tall. Inside the broken expanse, the ship's giant engines, some as tall as 4 stories, still stand where they failed decades ago. Several boilers are also visible, hinting at the scale and complexity once contained within. The chaotic jumble of steel includes twisted openings where enclosed rooms once were, making it difficult to identify specific layouts or cabins. Broken walls and bent framing lose any architectural order, demanding intense effort from explorers to piece together what the stern once looked like. This obscurity makes filming and documenting the stern challenging compared to the bow's clear silhouette. This stark difficulty symbolizes the ship's final agony and ongoing decay. The bow can still serve as a memorial, holding a certain solemn beauty in its relative preservation. The stern, on the other hand, forces viewers to face violence frozen in time. It refuses to comfort or invite admiration, instead exposing raw destruction. The wrecked form of the stern tells an unmistakable story. It wasn't a graceful descent or a quiet final resting place, but a brutal, violent end. Its ruined edge, sinking into the ocean floor, gives visual weight to this harsh truth. The exposed machinery, collapsed metal plates, and crushed structure all whisper of the catastrophic forces at play as the ship broke up. The stern's shattered reality prompts a pressing question. How did two halves of the same ship end up in such drastically different conditions? Understanding what destroyed the stern requires examining the specific forces that battered it both during and after the sinking, highlighting contrasts that shaped each half's fate. The contrasting fates of the Titanic's halves become clearer when considering the violent breakup at the surface and the harrowing journey each section endured. Mechanics of the breakup and descent. By around 2:18 in the morning on that fateful night, the bow of the Titanic was heavily flooded, forcing the stern to rise dramatically out of the water, exposing its propellers. This extreme angle put immense stress on the ship's midsection until the structure finally gave way, cracking apart the vessel into two distinct parts. From this moment, the bow and stern began separate and very different journeys to the ocean floor. The bow's pointed front end offered it a critical advantage. Severely flooded and dense with water, it sank like a heavy dart, slicing cleanly through the ocean depths. This helped preserve its shape as it descended, leading to the relatively intact condition now seen on the seabed. It was a focused, streamlined fall, brutal but orderly compared to what happened behind. The stern, however, had no such advantage. It had been torn open in the breakup, leaving vast empty spaces inside rather than a solid, heavy mass. Lacking a pointed nose to guide its descent, the stern behaved more like a hollow shell tumbling through water. No longer stable, it spun, rolled, and corkscrewed for over 2 miles as it fell, battering itself relentlessly against the pressure and currents around it. This chaotic descent explains much of the stern's shattered state today. Researchers studying high-resolution scans suggest the stern tore itself apart during its plunge, the water grabbing it at multiple points and worsening the damage before it even reached the seabed. It was a dynamic, violent fall rather than a gentle drop, with its structure breaking apart before impact. Meanwhile, ocean pressure increased rapidly with depth, roughly 1 atmosphere for every 33 feet of descent. At 12,500 feet deep, the stern endured crushing external forces while still holding pockets of trapped air inside. These air spaces compressed dramatically during the fall, sometimes bursting outward as steel could no longer contain them. This process further fragmented the wreckage from within. Older forensic reviews describe this as a slow disintegration during descent rather than a sudden explosion. Decks collapsed into one another, hull plates sheared away, and large sections twisted back onto themselves. This explains the extensive debris fields scattered across the seafloor between the bow and stern, where heavy parts fell closer to the site and lighter, broken pieces flung outward. Finally, the stern's impact with the seabed delivered the last devastating blow. Its keel is now deeply embedded in thick, clay-like sediment, evidence of a hard, forceful landing. A section that had already been battered into ruin was driven further into destruction by the sheer force of impact, finishing off much of the remaining structure. This stack of punishment, from surface stress to tumbling fall, crushing pressure, and brutal seabed collision, created the stern's broken, mangled form. The story of these forces helps explain why the Titanic's two halves tell such different tales on the ocean floor today. Ongoing decay and the rustical effect. The Titanic's descent into oblivion did not end when it struck the ocean floor. Beneath the crushing depths, the wreck continues to deteriorate in a slow but relentless process that is as harsh as the disaster itself. Salt water steadily corrodes the remaining steel, while deep-sea currents strike and shift the structure, gradually weakening what is left of the once mighty ship. Over time, natural forces are reclaiming the remains piece by piece. One of the clearest signs of this decay is the formation of rusticles, icicle-like structures hanging from the wreck. These are not just rust, but living colonies of iron-consuming bacteria. In 2010, scientists identified one of these microbes and named it Halomonas titanicae. These organisms feed on the ship's iron, accelerating corrosion and causing the metal to crumble. As a result, sections of the wreck slowly collapse into the sea floor. The stern, already heavily damaged during the sinking, is especially vulnerable. Its broken structure and exposed surfaces allow rusticles and bacteria to spread more easily. This speeds up the breakdown process, steadily reducing what remains of its form and hastening its collapse. The bow, often considered the more intact section, is also deteriorating. In recent years, explorers have documented noticeable losses, including the collapse of parts of the officers' quarters and sections of railing that have broken away and fallen into the sediment. These changes confirm that no part of the Titanic is stable or permanent. This ongoing destruction highlights an important reality. The Titanic is not a preserved monument frozen in time, but a site of active decay. Each expedition captures only a temporary moment in a continuing process of collapse. What is visible today may not survive much longer as biological, chemical, and physical forces continue to act on the wreck. Because of this rapid deterioration, efforts to preserve the Titanic have shifted toward digital documentation. Between 2022, researchers captured hundreds of thousands of images and extensive laser scan data to create a detailed digital replica of the wreck. This digital twin preserves its structure in high resolution, capturing details that may soon disappear from the physical site. While this technological preservation is a major scientific achievement, it also underscores the fragility of the real wreck. The Titanic now exists in two forms, one slowly dissolving under the sea and another preserved in digital space. Its story continues through both material decay and historical memory, outro. The Titanic's back half remains hidden in the shadows, not simply because of neglect, but because its brutal, ongoing destruction tells a story very different from the calm image most people know. This violent and heartbreaking reality challenges us to rethink what it means to remember the past, reminding us that sometimes the most important truths are the hardest to face. Thank you for watching. If you found this deep dive into the Titanic's hidden story compelling, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more fascinating explorations of history's untold realities.